Hi everyone! So for this lecture video, I am going to discuss to you the last part of the conic section or the last type of conic section, which is the hyperbola. So let's start with the learning objectives. So for the learning objectives, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to A, or number 1, define hyperbola. Number 2, determine the standard form of equation of a hyperbola. 3, graph a hyperbola in a rectangular coordinate system. And 4, solve situational problems involving hyperbola. To begin with, let us first recall the definition of hyperbola. Okay? So when you say hyperbola, it is generated when the plane intersects both naps. In plain sight, it looks like two parabolas facing backwards and are opening in opposite directions. So as you can see, here's an example, or here's a sample figure of a hyperbola intersecting ano po, in a nap. So as you can see, the plane intersects in two naps. Okay? So in plain sight, if you're just going to look at the figure, it looks like two parabolas facing opposite directions. Ano po? Okay. So when you say hyperbola, it is the set of all points in a plane such that the absolute value of the difference of whose distances from two fixed points is constant. The two fixed points are called the foci. The constant referred to in the definition is 2 times a. So just like ellipse, ano po, since dalawa din po yung branches or there are two curves in hyperbola, there are also two foci. Okay, foci is the plural form of focus. Ano po, so there are two foci in hyperbola. Okay? So, next. A graph of hyperbola includes the following. So, there are a lot of types or parts of a hyperbola. So, let us define each parts of the hyperbola. So, the first one is the branches. So, the branches refer to the curves of a hyperbola. So, these are an example of branches of hyperbola. Okay. Next, we have the foci. Foci refer to the fixed points lying on the transverse axis. Each focus is C units away from the center. So as you can see, sabi ko nga kanina, as I mentioned, there are two foci in hyperbola. So dito po nakalocate si foci. Lagi po yung nasa unahan ng branches or nasa unahan ng graph or nasa unahan ng hyperbola. Okay, yung dalawang foci. Next, we also have what you call the transverse axis and the conjugate axis. Ano po? So there are two types of axis of symmetry in hyperbola. Same with ellipse. Ano po? Dalawa din po yung types ng axis of symmetry in hyperbola. We have first the transverse axis. It contains the two vertices as its endpoints and the two foci and is parallel to the axis of the positive variable. The length of the transverse axis is 2 times a. So as you can see, si transverse axis po, nandyan po nakalagay yung dalawang foci, two foci, and the vertices of the hyperbola. So you will know kung nasaan ang transverse axis if kung nasaan yung focus, yan po yung transverse axis niya. Okay? Next, we also have the conjugate axis. Conjugate axis is perpendicular to the transverse axis and contains the two imaginary vertices, known as the co-vertices as its endpoints. The length of the conjugate axis is 2 times b. So here's the conjugate axis. Okay, so kung nasaan yung co-vertices, yan po yung conjugate axis. Kung saang axis po yung co-vertices, yan yung what you call the conjugate axis. Kung nasaan naman po yung dalawang foci, kung nasaang axis naman yung dalawang foci, yan po yung transverse axis. Okay, so there are a lot more. We also have what you call the center, of course, the center of a hyperbola. It refers to the point of intersection of the transverse axis and conjugate axis. Of course, nandito yan sa center mismo or in the middle part of the graph. Okay? Vertices denoted as V that are both A units away from the center of a hyperbola. Okay, so si vertices, nandyan din po siya sa transverse axis. Okay? So, ang transverse axis, pwedeng horizontal transverse axis and pwedeng vertical transverse axis. So, in this example figure, this is an example of a horizontal transverse axis. Okay, we also have what you call the co-vertices. These are the endpoints of the conjugate axis. Each co-vertex is B units away from the center. Okay, asymptotes. Asymptotes of a hyperbola are imaginary lines that will never be touched by its branches. So, as you can see, those orange broken lines, these are what you call the asymptotes. Okay, so when you say asymptotes, it will never touch its branches. So, ito yung branches natin, di ba? And then, ito yung asymptotes natin. So, hindi po yan nagta-touch with each other, the branches and the asymptotes. Although they were getting closer and closer, pero hindi po sila magta-touch with each other. Okay? And also, we have the latera recta. These are the line segments passing through the foci and are perpendicular to the transverse axis. So, mostly kapag naghahanap po tayo ng coordinates and equations of a hyperbola, we usually find the endpoints of the latera recta. Okay? So, si latera recta po, usually nakalocate siya dito. Yan. Yung endpoints of the latera recta. Or here. Dito pala, sorry. Ito yung foci. Usually, nakalocate sila dyan. Okay, so we also have other two parts of a hyperbola wherein hindi naman sila masyadong necessary when graphing a hyperbola. We have what you call the central rectangle and the directrices. Okay, so ano yung central rectangle? Ito yung central rectangle. As you can see, there are broken lines. Green or blue broken lines there. Yan po yung tinatawag nating central rectangle. Okay, usually hindi naman talaga siya necessaryong ilagay sa graph. And also we have the directrices. So since dalawa yung branches or dalawang yung curve ng hyperbola, we also have two directrices in the graph. Okay, so let's go to the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola. Okay, as I mentioned kanina, there are two types of transverse axis, the horizontal transverse axis and the vertical transverse axis. So therefore, meron din po silang magkaibang standard form of the equation. So first, we have the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola with the center at HK and a horizontal transverse axis where y is equal to k is the quantity x minus h squared all over a squared minus the quantity y minus k squared all over b squared is equal to 1. So this is the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola if it is a horizontal transverse axis. And when the center is located at the origin, the standard form of the equation becomes x squared all over a squared minus y squared all over b squared is equal to 1. Okay, so please take note of the standard form of the equation if it is a horizontal transverse axis. So ito yung standard form niya if the center is at HK, and ito naman if the center is at the origin or 0, 0. Okay? Next, how about the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola kung nasa vertical transverse axis siya? Okay? So the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola with the center at HK and a vertical transverse axis, y equals k is the quantity y minus h squared all over a squared minus the quantity x minus h squared all over b squared is equal to 1. When the center is located at the origin, the standard form of the equation becomes y squared all over a squared minus x squared all over b squared is equal to 1. So as you can see, as you can observe, meron pong difference between the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola kapag nasa horizontal transverse axis siya and si standard form of the equation of a hyperbola kung nasa vertical transverse axis siya. Okay? So, dun sa horizontal transverse axis, ang nandito sa may unahan na variable is x. Kapag vertical naman, usually y po ang nandito na variable. Okay? So, comparing to ellipse, pag sa ellipse, 'di ba, ang standard form dapat a is greater than b. Okay? While in hyperbola, hindi po natin ina-apply yung property na yon. Okay? Basta, yung denominator na nandito will always be the a squared and the denominator na nandito will always be the b squared. Regardless kung mas mataas yung denominator dito or dito. Basta always na nandito si a squared and nandito yung b squared. Okay? Next. So the table below describes the coordinates and equations involved in graphing a hyperbola when the center is at 0, 0. So here's the table that describes on how you are going to find the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola if the center is at the origin. Okay, so here's the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola, and it is a horizontal transverse axis. So we have x squared all over a squared minus y squared all over b squared is equal to 1. Ano po? So ito yung gagamitin natin in finding the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola if it is a horizontal transverse axis. We also have, kapag vertical transverse axis, ito din yung gagamitin natin to find the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola kung vertical transverse axis siya. So we have y squared all over a squared minus x squared all over b squared is equal to 1. Okay, so you need to have a copy of the table so that it will help you to find the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola. Okay, so ito yung magiging guide nyo kapag naghahanap kayo ng points, ng coordinates, okay, ng hyperbola. Okay, so this one, if the center is at the origin. Okay, so let's try example number 1. Let's try to answer example number 1. So given the equation, y squared all over 81 minus x squared all over 36 is equal to 1. Provide the following. Equation of the transverse axis, equation of the conjugate axis, coordinates of the center, coordinates of the vertices, coordinates of the co-vertices, coordinates of the foci, coordinates of the endpoints of the lateral recta, equation of the asymptotes, and equation of the directrices, then graph the hyperbola. Okay. So last, we're going to sketch the graph or graph the hyperbola. Okay, so if you are going to look at the equation, malalaman mo agad if nasa horizontal transverse axis siya or vertical transverse axis. So since yung nasa unahan na variable is y squared or y, masasabi na natin agad na this is an example of a vertical transverse axis. Okay? So we are going to find the transverse axis, the asymptotes, the conjugate axis, directrices, center, vertices, co-vertices, foci, and the endpoints of the lateral recta. So let us first compute for the value of A, B, and C. Okay? So we all know that A squared is equal to 81. Okay? So this one is A squared. And we all know that B squared is equal to 36. Now, to find the value of A, we are just going to get the square root. Ano po? We're just going to get the square root. So, square root both sides. Square root lang natin yung both sides. So, we have square root of A squared is A. And square root of 81 is 9. Okay? So, we already have the value of A, which is positive 9. To find the value of B, same. We're going to get the square root. So, square root lang natin yan. So, B squared, square root of B squared is B. And the square root of 36 is 6. So, we already have the value of B, which is 6. So, to find the value of C, okay, we all know that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. Okay, so C squared, we are just going to find the value of C squared, we're just going to add A squared plus B squared. So 81 plus 36 is 81 plus 36 is 117. So c squared is equal to 117. So to find the value of c, we're just going to square root. Ano po? Square root lang natin. So c is equal to square root of 117 is 3. The square root of 13. Okay, next, we can now find the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola. So to find the transverse axis, okay, since ano siya, vertical transverse axis, so x is equal to 0 and y, for the conjugate axis, y is equal to 0. Of course, center is at origin or 0, 0. Vertices, to find the coordinates of the vertices, we have 0, positive, negative, a. So 0, positive, negative, a. Okay, so for the vertices, we have 0, a is equal to 9, so 0, 9, and 0, negative, 9. To find the value of covertices, we have positive, negative, b, 0. So the value of b is 6. So positive 6, 0. And negative 6, 0. To find the coordinates of the foci, we have 0, positive, negative, c. So 0. The value of c is 3, the square root of 13. So 3, positive 3, the square root of 13, and 0, negative 3, the square root of 13. Okay? So for the endpoints of the lateral recta, to find the endpoints of the lateral recta, we have positive, negative b squared all over a, negative c. So let us first find the value of b squared all over a. So b squared is 36. 36 over 9 is 36 divided by 9, that is 4. So therefore, b squared all over a is 4. So to find the endpoints of the lateral recta, positive, negative, b squared all over a. So positive 4 and negative c. So negative 3, the square root of 13. Next, another endpoint. So negative 4 and negative c. So negative 3, the square root of 13. Next, since we have 4 endpoints of the lateral recta, okay, 4 po ang endpoints natin sa lateral recta. So, ito yung dalawa. We still have 2 more endpoints. So, to find the 2 endpoints, we have positive, negative b squared all over a and positive c. Okay, so we have 4, positive 7, ay positive c, so 3, the square root of 13, and negative 4, and positive c, so 3, the square root of 13. Next, to find the asymptotes, we have equation of the asymptotes. Y is equal to plus, minus, or positive, negative a over b squared. Okay, so to find a over b, let us first find the value of a over b. Okay, so a is equal to 9, b is equal to 6. So reduce it to lowest term. 9 over 6 is equal to 3 over 2. Okay, so therefore, y is equal to 3 over 2x and y is equal to negative 3 over 2x. To find the directrices, we have y is equal to positive negative a squared all over c. So let us find the value of a squared all over c. So a squared is 81 and c is 3 the square root of 13. So 81 all over 3 the square root of 13. So 81 divided by 3 is 27. 27 the square root of 13 over 13. Okay, so we have y is equal to a squared all over c is 27. The square root of 13 over 13. And, syempre, dalawa yung directrices natin. So, y is equal to negative 27, the square root of 13 over 13. So, we already find the coordinates of the hyperbola. Now, let us graph. So, if you are going to graph this coordinates and the equation as well, the graph looks like this. Okay, so the graph will look like this one. So here's the graph of the example number 1. So as you can see, this is an example of a vertical transverse axis. So ito yung transverse axis niya. Ito. So ito yung branches. As you can see, this is the foci. Okay. Ito yung foci. Ito yung first foci, f of 1 and f of 2. Okay. Ito yung vertices. Okay. Yan. Ito yung endpoints of the latera recta. Yan yung endpoints of the latera recta. So, itong color orange and color violet, yan yung directrices. Itong pa-X na color green. Okay, itong line na color green and line na color blue, these are the asymptotes. And of course, ito yung center. Okay? So, as you can see here, this is the conjugate axis. Okay, so nandito si conjugate axis. Here are the co-vertices. Okay, so here's an example of a vertical transverse axis. Next, let's have the example number 2. So given the equation x squared all over 49 minus y squared all over 9 is equal to 1, provide the following. Equation of the transverse axis, equation of the conjugate axis, the center, the vertices, the co-vertices, the foci, endpoints of latera recta, asymptotes, and equation of the directrices. Then graph the hyperbola. So as you can see, the equation is an example of a horizontal transverse axis since yung nasa unahan na variable is x squared. Okay, so this is a horizontal transverse axis. So we all know that a squared is equal to 49 and b squared is equal to 9. So let us first compute the value of a, b, and c. So a is equal to, okay, same procedure, just get the square root. So square root of 49 is 7 and square root of 9 is 3. Okay, so c squared, to find the value of c squared, we're just going to add 49 plus 9 is equal to 58. Okay, 49 plus 9 is 58. So just square root. So the square root of 58 is square root of 58. Next, to find the transverse axis, so this is center at origin pa din. So x is equal to 0. Y is equal to y pala since this is a horizontal transverse axis. So y is equal to 0 and x is equal to 0. Center, of course, center is at 0, 0. Vertices, to find the vertices, we have positive, negative, a, 0. So a is 7, 0, and then negative 7, 0. To find the co-vertices, we have 0, positive, negative, b. So 0. The value of b is 3. So positive 3 and negative 3. 0, negative 3. To find the coordinates of the foci, we have positive, negative, c, 0. So our c is square root of 58. So we have positive square root of 58, 0, and negative square root of 58, 0. To find the endpoints of the lateral recta, we have negative c, positive, negative, b squared all over a. So let us find the value of b squared all over a. B squared all over a. So b squared is equal to 9 and a is equal to 7. 9 over 7, so wala na siyang lowest term. So 9 over 7 na yan. So we have negative c, so negative the square root of 58, and positive negative b squared all over 7. So 9 over 7, and another negative the square root of 58, negative 9 over 7. Next, since apat yung endpoints of lateral recta, to find the other coordinates, we have positive c, which is positive the square root of 58, positive square root of 58, and then positive, negative, a, b squared all over a. So 9 over 7, and then negative, sorry, it must be positive pala. Positive c, so positive c, so square root of 58, and negative 9 over 7. To find the asymptotes, we have y is equal to positive, negative, b over a x. So to find b over a, let's just substitute. B is 3 over a is 7. 3 over 7. Okay, so hindi na natin siya pwedeng i-lowest term. So 3 over 7 na yan. So for the asymptotes, we have y is equal to 3 over 7 x, and y is equal to negative 3 over 7 x. For the directrices naman, we have x is equal to positive and negative a squared all over c. So let us find the value of a squared all over c. A squared all over c. So a squared is equal to 49. C is the square root of 58. Okay, so we have 49, the square root of 58 all over 58. Okay, so for the directrices, we have positive 49, the square root of 58 all over 58, and x is equal to negative 49, the square root of 58 all over 58. Okay, so since um, we've completed the coordinates and the equations of a hyperbola, we can now graph the hyperbola. So if you're going to graph the hyperbola, the graph will look like this one. Okay, so this is an example of a horizontal transverse axis. So as you can see, yung branches ng hyperbola, ang directions niya is left side and right side. Kapag vertical naman, upward and downward. So since horizontal ito, left side and right side yung branches ng hyperbola. So as you can see, ito yung foci. Nandito si foci. Okay? Ito, si vertices. Ito yung apat na endpoints ng lateral recta. That's why 4 ang endpoints ng lateral recta na hinahanap natin. So ito yun. Okay? For the co-vertices, here are the co-vertices, the letter D and letter E. Yung center natin, of course, at 0, 0, yung letter A. So, itong lines na color violet and color orange, these are the directrices. And yung lines na color green and color blue are the asymptotes of the hyperbola. Okay? Next, how about if the center is at HK? So the table below describes the coordinates and equations involved in graphing a hyperbola when it is at HK. So the center is at HK. So we already know the standard form of the equation of a hyperbola kapag it is a horizontal transverse axis and vertical transverse axis. Okay, so for horizontal, we have the quantity x minus h squared all over a squared minus the quantity y minus k squared all over b squared is equal to 1. So here are the coordinates. Here are how you're going to find the coordinates in the equations of a hyperbola. So eto na yon, mga guide nyo to find the coordinates and equation. Also for the vertical transverse axis, here are also on how you are going to find the coordinates and equations of a hyperbola. So you need to have a copy of this, just like in finding the coordinates and equations. If the center is at 0, 0, ganito din po. You need to also have a copy of the table. If the center is at HK, ito yung gagamitin natin. Okay, so let's try to answer some items. Okay, so example number 3. Given the equation, the quantity x minus 1 squared all over 25 minus the quantity y plus 2 squared all over 4 is equal to 1. So let us find, of course, the transverse axis, the conjugate axis, coordinates of the center, coordinates of the vertices, coordinates of the co-vertices, coordinates of the foci, endpoints of the lateral recta, asymptotes, and the equation of the directrices. Then graph the hyperbola. So, in this equation, you already know, makikita mo na agad na this is an example of a horizontal transverse axis. Since yung nasa unahan na variable is x. Okay? Always po yan, kapag ang nasa unahang variable is x, horizontal siya. Kapag ang nasa unahang variable is y, vertical siya. Okay? So we all know that a squared is equal to 25 and b squared is equal to 4. So let us first find the value of a squared, b squared, and c squared. So a, for the value of a, same procedure, get the square root. Square root of 25 is 5. And square root of 4 is 2. Okay, square root of 4 is 2. Okay, for the c squared, i-add lang natin yung dalawa. A squared plus b squared, so 25 plus 4 is 29. So c squared is equal to 29. So to find the value of c, we are just going to square root 29. So ano yung square root ng 29? Square root of 29 pa rin. Okay, c is equal to the square root of 29, a is equal to 5, and b is equal to 2. Okay, so to find the transverse axis, since horizontal transverse axis siya, to find the transverse axis, y is equal to k. So what is k here? Ang k natin dito is negative 2. So y is equal to negative 2. And for the conjugate axis, x is equal to h. So x is equal to, so our h here is 1, positive 1. For the center, we have 1, negative 2. Okay? The center is at HK, which is 1, negative 2. To find the vertices, we have H plus minus A, then K. So H plus minus K. So we have H is 1 plus A which is 5. So we have 6. And then K is negative 2. So 6, negative 2. And ano pa? So H minus A. So 1 minus 6 is negative. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. And K is negative 2. Okay, for the co-vertices. Okay, so just look at the table. Ano po? So, yun yung magsisilbing guide nyo para mahanap nyo yung mga coordinates ng hyperbola. So, for the co-vertices, we have 1, 0, and 1, negative 4. To find the coordinates of the foci, we have 1 minus the square root of 29 and negative 2 and 1 plus the square root of 29 and negative 2 pa rin. Okay? For the endpoints of the lateral recta, we have 1 minus the square root of 29 and negative 6 over 5. Next, 1 minus the square root of 29 and negative 14 over 5. Another endpoints, we have 1 plus the square root of 29 negative 6 over 5 and 1 plus the square root of 29 negative 14 over 5. Okay, so let's go to the equation of the asymptotes. So for the equation of the asymptotes, we have y is equal to 2x minus 12 all over 5 and y is equal to negative 2x minus 8 all over 5. For the directrices, we have x is equal to 29 plus 5 the square root of 29 over 29 and x is equal to 29 minus 5 the square root of 29 all over 29. Okay, so in order for you to get the complete coordinates and equations of a hyperbola, I repeat, you need to look at the table. Okay po, so yan yung magsisilbing guide nyo para mahanap nyo tong mga coordinates ng hyperbola. Okay, so after finding the coordinates of a hyperbola, let us now graph. Look at the graph of the hyperbola. So pwede nyo na yan i-graph since kompleto na yung coordinates nyo and equations. So let's go. Look at the graph of the hyperbola. So this is A. Okay, so here's the graph. Okay, we all know that horizontal transverse axis siya, di ba? So ayan yung graph niya. So the point, the center is not at 0, 0. So yung center natin is at 1, negative 2. Diba? So our center is at 1, negative 2. Ayan siya, yung letter A. Okay, etong letter D and letter E, yan yung co-vertices. Okay, yung foci natin, we have F and G. Vertices, okay, we have B and C. Yan yung vertices. Endpoints of the lateral recta, we have J, K, H, I. H, I, J, K. Okay, so ito yung branches ng hyperbola. We also have the color orange and violet na intersection. Yan yung directrices. And for the lines, color blue and green, yan po yung, the intersection lines are the asymptotes. The color blue and green lines are the directrices. Okay? Next, another example. Example number 4. Given the equation, the quantity y minus 3 squared all over 16 minus the quantity x plus 5 squared all over 36 is equal to 1. Provide the following. So we have the equation of the transverse axis, equation of the conjugate axis, coordinates of the center, vertices, co-vertices, foci, coordinates of the endpoints of the lateral recta, and equations of the asymptotes and directrices. So we all know that this is an example of a vertical transverse axis, and a squared is equal to 16, and b squared is equal to 36. So let us first compute for the value of a, b, and c. For the value of a, we're just going to get the square root. The square root of 16 is 4. And for b squared is equal to 36. The square root of 36 is 6. Okay? To find c squared, so we're just going to add 16 plus 36. 16 plus 36 is 52. So square root mo lang yung c squared and 52. So the square root of 52 is 2 the square root of 13. Okay? Next, let us now find the coordinates of the equation, of the hyperbola. For the transverse axis, x is equal to h. So we all know that h is negative 5 and k is positive 3. So x is equal to negative 5 and y is equal to 3. Center at HK, so we have negative 5, 3. Vertices, we have negative 5, 7, and negative 5, negative 1. For the co-vertices, we have 1, 3, and negative 11, 3. For the foci, we have negative 5, 3, plus 2, the square root of 13, and negative 14, negative 5, negative 5, 3 minus 2, the square root of 13. Next, to find the endpoints of the lateral recta, we have 4, 3 minus 2, the square root of 13. Next, negative 14, 3 minus 2, the square root of 13. And then, next, we have 4, 3 plus 2, the square root of 13, and negative 14, 3 plus 2, the square root of 13. For the equations of the asymptotes, we have y is equal to 2x plus 19 all over 3, and y is equal to 2x negative 2x minus 1 all over 3. For the directrices, we have y is equal to 17 over 3 and y is equal to 1/3. Okay, so I repeat, to find the coordinates and equation of the hyperbola, you need to have the table, ano po, to complete the coordinates. And then you may now graph. Okay, so we can now graph the hyperbola since kompleto na yung coordinates natin. So the graph will look like this one. Okay, so this one is a vertical transverse axis. So nakikita nyo, vertical transverse axis siya. Yung branches ng hyperbolas are upward and downward. Okay, opposite side. So ito yung foci, letter F and letter G. Vertices, letter B and letter C. Okay, so for the endpoints of the lateral recta, we have H, I, J, K. So apat yon. Ano po? Yung lines, intersecting lines, color violet and color orange, yan yung asymptotes. The center is at negative 5, 3. Ito yung center. Here are the co-vertices. Okay. The lines, color, yung parallel lines na color green and color blue, these are the directrices. Okay, yung color red na line, yan yung conjugate axis. Yung color blue na line, yan yung transverse axis. Okay, so this one is the end of the part 1 of the lecture video in hyperbola. So kindly watch the part 2 of the lecture video. So there, we are going to talk about, or I am going to discuss how you are going to rewrite from standard form to general form of the equation of a hyperbola and vice versa. Okay, thank you for watching. See you in part 2. Bye!